I have prepared this webinar for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have been working on INKISH+MAGS for too long time, to be honest. It was a project that started already before the pandemic, where we started thinking about, of course, INKISH. We have to do something in print. Cannot just be films, since we're covering the printing industry. So that was one of the reasons. One of the other reasons, which I will not touch so much upon today, was basically how can you do something in print that is global? Because if you want to do it really global, you need to have it in multiple languages. It's easy to translate into different languages, but then again, if you have to print and send out, and who should you send it to, and how many languages should you cover? If it ends up being too expensive, you can have all the best ideas, but sometimes it just doesn't really work out in real life. So we had to figure out a business model and also a model for how to create content that is relevant. And that is what this webinar is about, because now we are in the middle of our production of our first INKISH+MAGS magazine. And we call this webinar Max Impact with INKISH+MAGS, and I hope you will like it. So let's move to forward, and if you have any questions, the chat is open. You just fire away, and I will try to answer the questions as we go on, or there will be time in the end to do that as well. So for those who don't know me, this is who I am, because I am, beside being the editor of INKISH and a very hardworking person, to be honest, I share more time with the industry than with my family. So I always keep this photo with me, because I can see how beautiful a family I have. I'm married to Nina, and I have 3 kids. Casper is 16 in a couple of weeks, Mads is 18, and Christine is 29. And I'm not even kidding when I'm saying I'm spending more time with you guys than I'm with my family, because last year I was traveling 200 days. So I think I probably have the most patient family you can ever think of. That is also something of a concern, because I want to keep my family, but that's something we can take that in a private room afterwards. That's okay. So we claim there is a need for an INKISH magazine, and the reason why we believe this is what we will try to go through in this presentation, but we will also try to give you an example of why it is very different from what you see. I mentioned the business model just before. First of all, if there is no need for a magazine, there's no reason for creating it. So it needs to serve a purpose. And a few things comes to mind from our side when we started developing it. We want to have something that inspires the industry. I have seen in the past years, of course, since we started developing INKISH+MAGS, look quite a lot into what is in the market already. And I'm not talking down to anything or anybody's magazines. I'm just saying that sometimes the magazines seems to not be so inspirational for the PSP. So we want to do something that really inspires the receiver, the reader of the magazine. And when I say that we want to do something that inspires, we are basically think that showcasing the best of technology, that comes to everything from print technologies to the design process, to the embellishment process, to the paper, to the binding. Everything we want to do is something that inspires. But what we are not doing is we are not asking for sponsorships of embellishment, sponsorship of paper, sponsorship of anything. And that is to us quite important, because then we have the editorial and the design control of all elements in what we do. So that is, in our opinion, quite important, because that is also, think of it for a second with the PSPs, when they go and give advice, and I advise their customers, they are the ones that are the specialists, they are the ones that give things. And that is why we are saying that, okay, this is something that inspires, and we're not talking the other things down, because that is great, but that's just another media compared to ours. We also want to do something that educate. And I think that education is extremely important. Every time we talk to both PSPs, to consultants, to vendors, it is quite evident today that when you enter into a buying process as a printing company, you're way more educated than you were in the past. So it's not just about having a press release. It's not just about having the specs. It's also trying to understand the context where the product operates in. And, that is what we have done with films for a long time. And therefore, we believe that if we can have something that is really in-depth education, at the same time inspiring, then it's something that could be really interesting to look into. And we want to have something that engage. If our magazine and the media we do are not really interesting, if it is not something that has a value to the people that are reading it, no reason to create it. And the engagement is very important. So who are we writing to? Well, we want to do something that speaks to the reader, and our readers are the PSPs. PSPs or converters is a very broad term, of course, because you can always argue that, okay, this guy, is he the management or he's the operator of a printing press? We basically believe that we can talk to both types or all types of people in the printing company. But as INKISH has always been more focused on the business side, we still believe that we are talking to the, let's say, the management level, from production management to marketing management to sales management to top management in companies. But it's always in relation and in the angle of the printing company. So this is not so much about what the technology can do specification-wise, but maybe way more specifically into what the technology does for you as a business. So when we started looking into this, we soon realized that it would be too complex, too expensive to do a magazine in 20, 30, 40 languages and distribute it to all the people in the world. And then we started thinking about, okay, could we do it in the major languages like English, German, Spanish, French, for example, Arab, Chinese. And then we thought again, okay, the problem is not so much that it's not possible to do. The problem is, what do people want to read? And then we realized something that we have a lot of data on. And I want to share a little bit of data with you that is, we don't often share data, so take a screenshot. No, you can get the presentation afterwards. Here is the last stats that I took from our YouTube and our data resource channel yesterday. And it is quite interesting, because if you look at the first third of it to the left, to your left, you can see that if we take all the users we have on INKISH, 15.7% of our viewers are from the United States and 10.2% from Germany. And then it goes down, and obviously it has something to do with the size of the countries, because there are more Americans than Danes, so I think that Danes would have a low thing. Also, if you look at Japan, as a very low number, and it's because there's a cultural thing to it, and it's also a language thing to it. So if we do, the majority of our films are in English. We do have films in German, in French, in Dutch, in Spanish and Portuguese, and even in Chinese and Japanese. But for the majority, it's in English, and it's always subtitled into English. So that is all users. But what happens if we have an English-speaking German for what happens then? And then you can see in the center that it is actually 42.2% is now German. And for the no subtitles, it's 32.something%. And if you think of this for a second, the people that don't add the subtitle to it, they are probably German-speaking people. So that could be from Switzerland, Austria, or from the so-called DACH region, right? What is even more interesting to think about now, my colleague, he's also attending here today, Andreas, he did an interview with Hundsdorfer from Heidelberg a few years ago, where it is in German, and it's a German company, of course. And now you can see that it is 44% that are viewing it. But if you look at the no subtitles, it's more than 80%. So there's a big chance that Germans like German stories and German language. And even if we have it in English, there's a majority of the people are still German when they see the film. And the reason why this is important to understand is that if we really want to make something that is truly engaging with people, the stories needs to be from the country where you publish the magazine, and you have to have the magazine in the local language. in order to be relevant and engaging. So we thought about, okay, how can we actually do this in a way that makes sense, both from a production perspective, but also from a perspective of having a value that is, let's say, within reach budget-wise, because we're at the same time we're in a Drupa year, so people are spending a little bit less money on let's say everyday's business compared to normal years. There's also the inflation that takes place. There is also still an after effect of the COVID, where people are still like, what should we spend our money on? And where we see other magazines closing their print business, why are we thinking that it's even at all relevant to open up for a print business and distribution? And there's a couple of reasons for it. We have been, we are a big favor of what's called pull marketing. Pull marketing basically means that you look for the content, and when you need it, you find it. Then you need to be, it needs to be easy to find the content. It needs to be relevant, the content you find. Whereas the push marketing is something that in your face all the time. When you look at most media in the world, not just in the printing industry, they use the newsletters as an aggregator to drive traffic to their websites and to their sponsors. But I think a lot of us actually realize that getting a newsletter from let's say a trade media, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 times a day, is a little bit overwhelming. And some of us may actually just mark it as, okay, we want it, but we don't really read it. So having a push media in print has a huge advantage, because first of all, if we make something that has a very good content, is very relevant for the audience, that engage, that educate, and is relevant in local language because you can relate to the stories that you see and read, then that could be a push media towards the printed media. So here is what we are planning to do. We call it INKISH.MAGS. We like the word MAGS because it's short for magazine, but it also implies that it has a max impact because of the way you pronounce it. And if we can't do something that is different from current or existing media in the market, again, then there is no relevance to what we do. So there's a few things that we have also considered in that perspective. First of all, we are not a periodica, so that means that we are not published in the UK every month, or in Scandinavia every month, or in Germany every month. This means that we are publishing a magazine when we have enough content that is relevant for a specific market, and I will get into that in a second. So that means that we believe that we can have a perfect life side by side with existing media. So we're not trying to compete with them. Actually, we're trying to collaborate with some media, and we will get back to that in not so long time from now, because we believe that all the different media have different values. That doesn't mean that we think all media are good, but it means that the ones that we really appreciate and like, where they are also focusing on the viewer and the reader and all that perspectives, we think that has a huge impact. So the things that we want INKISH.MAGS to be is also something where we have no advertising. We don't even bring press releases. And let me explain why. The no press release thing is a couple of reasons. Vendors and also some of the larger printing companies uses press releases to push news to the media outlets, to basically share information about what is going on in the company, or new products or new changes in the organization that are important. That has some kind of instant need, and whatever way we do it, it takes time to create a printed magazine. So press releases is, in our opinion, something that belongs on our INKISH.news platform, or on all the other platforms that you're using for press releases. So there's no reason for taking a press release and convert it into an article and push it out, because it will be months old before it actually hits the reader. So that is one thing. The other thing is that when we have kind of in all our offerings kind of abandoned, I could say, advertising, it's for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that all of us, with almost no exception, is always trying to click the no AdWords on the YouTube channel as fast as we can, because the moment that we accept the fact of a pull marketing kind of thing. Then if you search for something and you want something, you don't want something else. So advertising is noise, advertising is disturbing, and advertising is something that we have to accept if that pays the bills. But there might be other ways of actually making sure that you can gain both the fundings that you need for creating content, and that is what we have done for years at INKISH. And with all due respect, it took a little bit time for people to understand our business model. But today we're working with almost every vendor, and we have a lot of also PSPs as clients, and our product offerings are diversing because we know that we need to have something that is very cheap, and we also need that we think and believe that we need something that is very exclusive. So there's no change for us whether it's a printed product or it is a physical product. No advertising also have the advantage to gives us a lot of time for something else, because we don't need to sell advertising, which is something that takes time, and we don't need to take care of adverts in our design. So we can make something that has a visual language that we believe is important for the PSP when they receive the magazine. Then we try to do the same way as we have done with INKISH, strong journalistic principles, and we continue to subscribe to the 7 news criteria. The 7 news criteria is something that the big newspapers are subscribing, and the big media has been subscribing to for years. That basically means that it needs to be relevant, it needs to be accurate, it needs to have the journalistic integrity, it basically needs to have some kind of urgency, sense of urgency to it, and it needs to be talking to the people that we have defined it to. That is no difference from before, but in a printed magazine, that actually makes things a little bit easier, because when we create the content for the magazine, we have 2 ways of thinking distribution. I will tell you a little bit more in a second, but just think of this for a second. We have either a geography where we can send out to everybody in Denmark, for example, or we can create a magazine that is specifically for workflow automation. Then it is about finding a database that can be distributed to all the relevant people that are working with the workflow automation. So it can either be a segment or it can be a geography. And that is something that we believe is very important in order to stay relevant to the audience. Then we are using this magazine also to not just be my not so pretty face, but industry specialists. So the first magazine that we're writing, actually, I would say 80% of the content is written by Nissan Cleary. I think a lot of you know Nissan Cleary as a very in-depth, he's a very recognized reporter. He has his own website, nissancleary.com. But we are actually having him writing a lot of the stories for a couple of reasons. First of all, he may see something that I didn't see, or that Jacques didn't see when we were doing the filming. And this is where we get the content from. And that is, of course, because it's our core product, let's say that way, is films. So when we do filming from, let's say, a printing company in California, which is the first magazine we're doing, we hand over the raw tape to Nissan. So he can actually formulate a story that might be entirely different from the story that we do on films. Because when we do the films, the stories are then, trimmed into a 10 minutes format. But the interviews that we have done with the printing company sometimes last 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, depending on how many people we're talking to. So the angle of the story is very different. And Nissan is now working on it. So let's see if it works. It's a testing thing here, but I'm pretty sure that he will manage to do that. We have also associated ourselves with James Quirk, who used to be the editor-in-chief of Labels and Labeling. So he will be specifically working on the label segment. And actually on Tuesday, we have the first test with him where we are going to visit a printing company, a converter in the UK. The name is Label Appeal, and basically he is doing the interviews and writing an article from there, and basically have that as a test how that can work out. Because I have done it, but I have also been with INKISH for almost 10 years, so of course I have some other experience than he has. We also want to invite other industry specialists and reporters and opinion makers to participate in the writing of the magazine. And as long as they, let's say, comply to, let's say, the generic structure of our journalistic criteria, everybody is basically welcome. And as said before, unbiased information. I found this from one of the media that I recognize and find very, very interesting to watch. It's an English-speaking German media called deutschewelle.dv.com, and they have a lot of YouTube channels with very good content. But they quote in their let's say in their about that we believe that journalism, education, and cultural improve people's lives, and that reliable, unbiased information and universal access to knowledge are fundamental rights. I wish I had wrote this, because this is exactly what we believe, and this is exactly why the need for unbiased information is so needed. Because think of this: people in our industry buy relatively huge investments in technology, and they need unbiased information to make the right decisions. That is very important. The second thing is that in-depth information, and here I found I'm using something called Pathfinder International, because they have different articles about journalism, and here's about in-depth information. So in-depth interview is a qualitative research technique that involves conducting intensive individual interviews with a small number of respondents to explore their perspectives on a particular idea, program, or situation. Think of this for a second. That means that instead of having, let's say, a little bit superficial information about a product or a business, we take the time, and we can do that even more in writing than we can do on film, to actually have, let's say, an understanding of the motivation for buying and investing in technology. That is a huge advantage for those of our sponsors that would like to be part of the magazine as well. Because let's say that you want to buy a printer, which is very likely these days. Of course, you need to know as much as possible to make sure that you take the right decision. You also need to know the competitiveness in the market. And if you have, let's say we make a segmented magazine about inkjet printers, you can always say that one vendor can think that, okay, we would like to have this magazine our own and not have our competitors there. But I mean, just look at ourselves. When we go to the supermarket, I don't know about you, but when I look at the vegetables, I take it up, I look at it, I take another vegetable up and take the one I like. It's the same when you buy, maybe not a good comparison, but it's almost the same, that if you buy something, you need to compare so the investment you do makes sense compared to the work you have to get done, basically, right? So the stories are about the printing companies that we're filming already. I will get back to that in a second as well. But on top of that, we always, in all magazines, have a section about business. That can be everything from pricing to financing to understanding some of the basics in circular economy, and that leads also to sustainability. These two subjects will always be there regardless of. So if you get a French edition of INKISH, there will be stories from France, from French converters and printers, and there will also be articles that are relevant in relation to business and sustainability in French. So this is how we want to do it. We also want it to be like that. If, let's say that, let me give you an example. We have one of the good guys in our network is Eddie Hagen from Belgium. He has actually developed a new color guide and it came because of the let's say the discussions between Pantone and Adobe. He is an individual that is doing a lot of things that benefits the printing industry. Yes, he might also be monetizing, but he's not a big business. He has a regular work besides. So when we have specialists that have something on mind, we would also like to take their stories and bring them to market, because that is the advantage of mass communication like this, is basically that we can bring stories that are relevant to the industry. So we want it to be inspiration to and from fellow printers. So let's dive a little bit into how we were going to do it. I have mentioned the language issues, and I've also told you a little bit about how we want to do it. let me start with something that I think is quite interesting. With the people that are either employed or freelancing with INKISH right now, we are now capable of offering INKISH+MAGS in Chinese, Dutch, English, French, German, Portuguese, Scandinavian, Spanish, and Thai languages. That doesn't mean that we can do everything, because the reason why we have to do it like this is because we need to have people that can actually do the interviews in these local languages. I don't know if you saw from FESPA, but we have a new freelancer, Lizzie, who is now, she did 12 interviews in Chinese from FESPA. And the same day as we published them, they were already in with English subtitles. So again, we try to bring the world closer to each of us. So here's how it works. Basically, we have been thinking, again, the business model, because we've been thinking about, okay, how can we actually make sure that we get the content? Because all our colleagues in the industry, they typically see that, okay, we have filming as one part of it, then we have the website as the third part of it, and then we have the magazine as a third part of the news aggregation they are providing. But we think of it is that our core product, and where we are best known for the past 9 years, is creating films. So what we do now is basically offering, let's say we do a tour like we did the California cruising, and like we're doing in India now, and what we have been doing in South Africa and Latin America as well. We basically say that, okay, when you sign up for a film on one of these tours, which is already discounted, because we can consolidate the work, now you can buy an add-on to become part of the magazine. And then the magazine is written based on the raw tapes. So the raw tapes are sent to Nissan or to James or to myself. And then we write the stories and make a magazine that I think looks really nice. And then it's distributed to either all printers in that area or to all segments of what we are covering in that area. So that basically means that now we can have more see INKISH+MAGS as an add-on to films rather than an independent product. And the advantages for everybody is basically that as we are already visiting a printing company, there's no cost of traveling because that has been covered already. Or we don't need to have additional resources about writing and photos from there because we're already there. So the only thing is that we need to figure out the how much does it cost to produce and distribute, and I will get to that in a second. So as I said, our core product is films. So what we do is basically saying that you buy a film package and then you buy an additional channel as part of it. So I think that will be, I think that's something that people like. We have been talking to a few people about it, and most people think this is a good way to do it. But I will let that to Josh for you. So you can kind of say that when we do films, the spin-off is magazines, and I actually say plus, because we have also decided, and we will get back to that shortly in a webinar similar to this, that we will also make spin-offs of events. So we will in 24 offer 5 industry events. And you know, most events in the industry are always evaluated by how many people attend in person. But isn't it more interesting to think about how we can actually make content and education available to as many as possible? So when we do events, for example, and we will get back to in details, but just to give you a little taste, we do a film about a product or a technology with a customer so you can see how it works. Then we have an add-on for having an event somewhere in Europe or in the US. And when people participate, instead of paying a lot of money participating at the event, they pay a smaller fee to participate in the event, and then they can invite as many as they want, and they pay for how many ever they want to participate at the event. Now we film the technology and talk to the people, the specialists attending the thing, creating more content, having a package that is then distributed through INKISH channels to even more people. That will not change the fact that there are really great in-person events in the world, but it will change that when you have a technology, for example, about inkjet, instead of talking to a few people, 30, 40, maybe 100, maybe 200 people, you talk to thousands of people. And with the quality of INKISH, you can get, think of this, you can have the film, you can have the INKISH+MAGS, you can have the INKISH events, And then you have a full ecosystem that is basically a kind of spin-off of the technology that is, in my opinion, really interesting here. So again, I said the articles are written from the raw tapes, but new stories are based from the same material. So here's how we are thinking of this to look. It's not very complex design, to be honest. But since we don't have to spend so much time on how many pages it is, or we don't have to take it to advertising, we basically say that, okay, here we can have a spread. This is a spread. The format is a square format. We can have large photos. We can have large spacing between text. This is kind of the Scandinavian and / Apple kind of great looking articles. And think of this for a second. The reason why we want to do this and focus on having a great look on these things. We are in the visual industry. We need to inspire people to use print. It needs to be something that can be shown to a customer to give an example on how things are being done, right? Other example here is also a spread. We have quite a few templates now that will be used for this one. There's a little red arrow, one thing, that every time you meet a white QR code, the white QR code brings you to the specifications of the product that you're seeing. And as you may have seen on the previous page, there was a black QR code, and that black QR code, that brings people specifically to the film on INKISH. So again, we try to build an ecosystem. We know that not all will want to read, but then they can digest the same content in a 8-10 minutes format on INKISH. And when they are interested in acquiring more information about the product, there is a white QR code having this. Of course, we will need to tell people the difference in the white and the black in the first stories, but I think that it will be quite evident when that is rolled out in more than one, two. So the stories links to the products / films, as I just mentioned to you. One of the things that are of course, important is I have already spoken about this with the distribution to the segment or geography, so I will just skip that for now, and then I will go to something that a lot of people are thinking about, because if we want to do this, who is getting it? Because I can tell you for $7,000 you can buy a list of 70,000 printing companies in the US. According to the address company delivering these are verified addresses, but that doesn't say anything about the quality. And if you buy it once, does it mean that it's relevant in next month or next week or even tomorrow? So what we do is basically we have a website where all the recipients are uploaded to. So at the moment you say, I would like to sponsor this, you can basically see who gets the magazine or which companies get the magazine. And if you want to have more people added to the list, you can upload your own data to make sure that they get the magazine. Does that mean that the companies that you upload, they will only get the magazine, or will it be everybody can see them? Yes, it will be everybody can see that, because basically we are not sharing anything that relates to anything that can be personal because of the GDPR and because of the California Privacy Act. So basically, the website is basically to give you, let's say, verification of which companies we are sending the magazine to after being printed. But the website will also have the engagement, so we can see what QR codes have been scanned for the different things. Because basically, what we want to do with the viewers and the readers is basically saying that if you're a printing company and you want to get promoted, you can try for yourself. You go to inkish.tv/USA. You can see, because this has been under development for some time, we have not published much about it, to be honest. But if you go there, okay, there I say that INKISH color code for films not white and black. Yeah, okay, we will think about that. But I want to say that if you go to inkish.tv/USA, you will get a Wikipedia about the US. You will be able to see what media you find in the US. You can see all the films we have made from the US, and you will also be able to see the printers that we have engaged with in the US. So basically now, when we send out a magazine to printing companies in California, if they act, if they react, if they scan things, if they register on our website, they will now be placed on the map, and we will be able to see the engagement level of the magazines, because we are quite certain that the QR codes and the stories will drive traffic somehow. So that is something we believe is also quite new. And then you can say, but how much does it cost? And then I just decided to say, we want to make a 30% on it. And the reason why I'm so bold with this is quite honestly, it's like, if we want to send out 10,000 magazines and print 10,000 magazines, the printing method and the distribution is entirely different than if you want to send out 70 copies to the entire industry in Estonia, for example, right? So the way we do it is actually in a way that we believe is very great, because as we have the list of who is getting it, and you will be able to see that, we thought, why not just share everything? So we share how much it costs to write, we share how much it costs to print, we share how much it costs to distribute, and then we add our 30% to it and divide it with the number of sponsors in that specific magazine. That basically means that of course we do that before we have a tour to the US or to Latin America or somewhere in Europe. But it's just the methodology here is, we call it 100% transparent pricing, because everybody will then be able to see, okay, how much does it actually cost to produce a magazine and distribute it and send it out. And one thing that I feel is quite important part of this, that is the printing always takes place in the country where it is distributed. So for example, the magazine we are now preparing for California is being printed in California. If we do something in France, it's produced in France. If it's done in the UK, it's done in the UK. And that is a giving back to the industry. And we are not asking for sponsors on print and paper and embellishment, things like that. That is part of the budget. Because the moment that you start to having all these kind of endorsed packages, it gives some kind of bias towards something. And we believe that it's extremely important to have an unbiased thing with this one. And think of this for a second. By having this open and transparent pricing model, that means that even if distributors or agents in smaller countries, like my own country, for example, if they want to have a Danish magazine about inkjet, it is still viable to do. Of course, the films cost something to do, but that is regardless whether you buy them from us or from a advertising agent or from anywhere else in the world. There is a pricing to producing things, but having the pull and push media at the same time gives you a lot of opportunity. And when the films are made in local languages and subtitled into English, it is still something that's available for others. But as you maybe remember from the statistics I did in the beginning from our YouTube channel and our analytics, you could see that the more local the information gets, the more relevant it is for the other local people because you can relate to it. So this is something that is not for the big countries. This is for all countries and for all vendors in case they want to have this kind of thing. So I also said that we wanted to have an impact. We are true believers, and I think that we have kind of proved it with INKISH during the years that by having unbiased information, having education and engagement leads to sales. We know from quite a few customers that having unbiased content and in-depth information about the industry and the technology and the business perspective of it leads to sales. I don't think that any one media, is print or in digital or webinars or anything like that, will lead to a sale. But it is it's a consolidation of information that gives the PSPs the proper information level to get to where he needs to be in order to make sure that he can make the right decisions in buying equipment from people that have spent a lot of time and money developing fabulous products, right? So, as I said, thank you very much. First of all, the first INKISH+MAGS is in production. We expect it to be sent out in August. It will be distributed to a little bit more than 1,000 printers in California. And we will also make a sign-up form soon, where people from not living in California in the industry will be able to ask for a copy, so we can get it out and show you how it looks in a physical version, rather than just in a digital version. And of course, we are very eager to see the reaction from the industry and from the players in California who gets it the first. And then we will very soon also have, let's say, the next magazine in thing, and we have some pretty nice ideas about that. And for those who might think things like this, it could also be something that could be very useful for if you go to trade shows, or if you have like local events where you think in a broader perspective that printed communication could be interesting to consider. So as always, this is Morten from INKISH. I hope you like the presentation. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me or Henrik. We are always very interested in talking to people about our ideas. This one is one of the ideas that we are very curious about, and we are very convinced that it will have an impact in communication with printers. And we soon have something very, very cool to show you.